All right, let's see what you cooked up, Mala.
The snappiness.
How do you even react to this? I saw the thing. There's like Asmongold, the guy, and Malachite or something. Ffxiv veteran reacts to Asmongold's worst hot take. Okay.
The snappiness and the explosiveness of, like, let's say classic WoW's combat, I think completely clears Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, this part is 100% true. It's not even close. Yeah, he's completely right about this. Hey guys, it's Malachite. Today I want to talk a little bit about Final Fantasy XIV. A while ago, Asmongold released a video titled, "Is Final Fantasy XIV Dying?", in which he reacted to a video by Xenosis with the same title. In his video, he mentioned a few things that he thought the game could improve on regarding gameplay, graphics, and content. This of course prompted a counter video from Desperius titled Asmongold's Worst Take on Final Fantasy XIV Yet. Asmon of course made a reaction video to this, in which he elaborated on his points. I'm mostly going to be reacting to clips from that video today, since I think they represent his takes the best. For those of you who want to know why my opinion might matter, I've put in over 5,000 hours into the game over the course of 3 years. I have cleared every single ultimate fight. I cleared the Omega Protocol in the first month. I cleared every Savage tier in Endwalker in the first week. I got to Crystal in the first season in PvP. I've been a hardcore player and I've been a casual player. I have hated the game and I have loved it. Because of all that, I believe I have valuable insight when it comes to FF14.
Malachite's probably one of the most passionate FF peoples, but yeah, lately he's been a sag. I think he feels betrayed about the game. We'll see what he says about it. He's been playing a lot of WoW too, so I think he has a good stance of where he can talk about, right?
And if you guys don't mind, I would like to share those with you today.
Sure.
What would make the game more interesting? I will tell you.
Dude, there's way too many. Where should I squeeze myself into chat?
This. If the game had the same graphics as Final Fantasy 16, I would probably play it more. Yeah, I think the graphics for Final Fantasy 14 are washed out. They're not that good.
From what I can remember, Asmongold has only played up until Stormblood, so some may say his opinion isn't the most well-informed.
No, I think I could say it too. When I first started FF, it was very hard for me to get used to the graphic. Coming from a lot of other MMOs, right? Yet, if you play it long enough, you get used to it. And a lot of people say just download mods and whatnot, but I wish those G shaders were like in the game to make it look nice already. They should just have it in, but it's that console problem, right? Let's see what Mala has to say.
With that said, as someone who has played every single expansion, what he is saying here is 100% true. This is a common complaint heard from many FF14 players, and is probably one of the biggest reasons why FF14 is so unappealing to many folks. Early game zones are plagued with low color contrast and poor saturation. Take the Black Shroud for example. The abysmal lighting on top of the low resolution textures gives the impression that you're looking at a set of props for a stage play.
Without it,
when I'm walking through the zone, it doesn't
dull.
feel like I'm existing in the world that is alive. Rather, what it feels like is that I'm a toy figurine stuck in a diorama. And really, I hesitate to say it gets better, because the reality is, it really doesn't. Zones in Endwalker face the exact same issue, with the only difference being the textures are generally higher in resolution. The colors look washed and monotone.
It's just like
the
lighting,
objects and the
I
buildings
believe.
and the landscape don't blend well together. And in the end, everything ends up looking flat and lifeless. And while graphics aren't the be-all end-all to a game, it is still an integral part of telling a story. It is responsible for setting the mood and ambience. And most important of all,
I don't know how to explain. Like the this raid, it looks very messy, man. There's a lot of stuff going on.
It's supposed to
it doesn't look clean. It's hard to say, man. As a WoW player,
help
it
immerse
looks a
you.
little.
Much like watching a movie. Generally, you won't notice when the visuals are good. If it's doing its job, it'll keep you immersed. But suppose you're watching a movie with dogshit CGI. It takes you out of the movie and it ruins the whole experience. Do I think it's realistic to wish for 14's graphics to look like 16's? Of course not. It's an MMO from 2010. But I understand his sentiments of wanting it to be improved, and I think many FF14 players are also in the same boat. Not only would it benefit the current player base, it would also bring in new players who are otherwise hesitant on trying the game.
If only the game looked like this, bro. If only the game.
Dude, I was literally watching this. Stoops was just blasting FF the whole day.
Looked at least a quarter this good. Bro, you look at this, you're like, yo, this is fucking sick, dude. Holy shit.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Code red, code
Thank
red.
you, Balbok, for the 10-month.
Then this video is for you. This guide will teach you how to play the job over 30, and then you want to explain how to use all the actions.
I think one of the things that makes Final Fantasy XIV unappealing is the fact that the game looks like shit. I think World of Warcraft has more appealing aesthetic than Final Fantasy XIV. Even classic WoW does.
I believe that regarding topics of aesthetics, that's mostly up to personal tastes. However, generally when you're comparing two aesthetics, I think it's true that one will be more appealing to the masses than the other. Personally, I have no preference either way, if not leaning to the side of FF a little bit. But I do believe that the aesthetics of WoW, in the grand scheme of things, serves to make a more visually appealing game. Final Fantasy XIV and WoW are both heavily stylized games, with
Yeah,
WoW
they
being
have their own
cartoonistic
styles.
and 14 leaning into realism. Objectively speaking, 14 assets are more complex than WoW's, but it's no secret that both games look dated. But dated doesn't equal unappealing. A good example is old school RuneScape, a browser game from 2007. Even by standards back then, RuneScape looked bad. Its simplistic graphics, coupled by its even simpler gameplay, you wouldn't think that this game would survive in today's climate. Yet in spite of that, it's
Yeah, it
actually one of the
looks
few MMOs growing in
Awful, but
popularity.
it's popular.
Why is that?
People
Since
like
the
it.
beginning, graphical fidelity was never a big selling point of RuneScape. Instead, what they've done is create a style that is so unique and iconic that it's become a timeless classic, instantly
That
recognizable to
character
everyone.
looks like Asmongold.
Instead of shying away from their dog shitness, they have embraced it. When you boot up RuneScape, there's no gaslighting yourself into thinking, oh, maybe the graphics gets better later on. You know what you're getting
Yeah.
into. When you're playing the game, usually you'll be playing top-down and zoomed out. This helps to hide a lot of the roughness of the game, and contributes to the visual clarity that it has from the game's simplicity. WoW, I think, is similar in many ways. You show anyone a picture, whether it be from retail or classic, and they'll instantly be able to tell you it's World of Warcraft. The stylized look and vibrant colors help hide the imperfections, while giving it the iconic look that we all know and love. A few weeks ago, I happened upon a picture from FF14 without any of the UI showing. And I kid you not, for a good second, I could not tell what game it was from. If this could happen to someone with 5,000 hours in the game, imagine someone who's never touched the game at all. By no means am I saying WoW visuals are necessarily superior to FF14's, but they do feel more cohesive
I
and
get what you're
inviting.
getting into.
The way I look at it, it's very much like CSGO versus Valorant. When I think of CSGO, I think of muted, realistic graphics. Valorant, on the other hand, has committed fully to that vibrant, saturated, stylistic look. And I think it's safe to say that Valorant owes their popularity in no small part to that. The Spears' rebuttal to Asmongold was to show a dungeon from Shadowbringers. But in my opinion, this worked against his point. The dungeon he chose just serves to highlight the problems that I talked about before. Poor shading, bad lighting, subpar lifeless textures. Problems like these are rampant even in Shadowbringers. When you compare it to zones that Asmongold's showing, like Bastion and Skyhold, it's insane. The zone I'm currently showing is from Endwalker, which is as recent as it gets. And while it doesn't look terrible by any means per se, it doesn't look amazing either.
Yeah.
It just looks lifeless and flat. And then for some strange reason beyond me, he decides to shoot himself in the foot and show off the game with G-Shade on. It just further juxtaposes how dog shit the game looks to what it could be.
I don't know why the game just doesn't have this in, man. Yo, F the controllers. Actually, I can't say that. Final Fantasy is too heavily on the controllers and PlayStation. They're downgrading because of the consoles, by the way, chat. It is 100%.
There's bloom, there's background blur, the shadings and the colorings and the character, the color palette.
Like I
could
said, if
go
you play the game, you get used to it.
on and on. Look
Different
at this
genres.
comparison picture. It is a night and day difference.
Yeah, that's G shader and no G shader.
Yet all that
Dude,
had
G shader looks so good. I don't know why the game just doesn't have that.
to be done was to put a fucking shader on.
It looks
Why isn't
so
this just
much
already
better.
in the game?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think
why.
they're completely incapable of making good-looking zones. In fact, I thought the new Alliance rig looked pretty good. But looking at this made me realize an even bigger problem, and I'll show you guys what I mean. The other day, I wanted to log on to retail to get some footage, but I was too lazy to. But that's okay because Savix logged on and got some clips for me from retail.
Dude, I haven't logged on so long. There's Goose right there. Shout out to Goose, of course. It felt good being on retail.
And when he got on his PvP mount from, I believe that's Shadowlands Season
Shadowlands.
1, if I'm not wrong, I couldn't really focus on anything else besides how bad Stormwind looked. And I'm not talking about the aesthetics, I'm talking about the fact that I can count each and every polygon with my toes. His character and the mount didn't look that bad,
Yeah,
but the
my
zone
mount
looked
insane.
butt fuck ugly. And that's where the problem is. Both FF14 and WoW lack graphical consistency. 1 minute you're in Valdrakken, everything's looking good, you're chilling, minding your own business, and then you port over to Stormwind and suddenly everything looks like it's made out of fucking Lego bricks. And I think this is the big issue that all live service games deal with, not just FF and WoW. For example, League of Legends has it, so does RuneScape. But in an MMO, it's especially noticeable because of how long it takes for expansions to release. It doesn't matter how good your new zones look if your old zones look like shit, because you're giving a bad first impression.
Chat, I'm just gonna pause right now and say, I think WoW versus FF, I don't think it should be about better graphic or not. It's about the combat movement and the end game. I don't know if he's gonna talk about that, but I've spoken a lot about it. FF endgame was the problem for me. I tried to all in that game. I spent so much. I think I spent like almost 2,000 hours, and I was trying to all in it. But then at the end, I ran out of things to do after I cleared DSR. I've done Crystal, PvP. I've done everything, and it just felt like I ran out. And people say, "Oh, that's fine. Just quit and play other games." But it's hard, man. When you're playing MMO, you want to get invested into it, and MMO, you want to log in all the time. It just didn't have something to chew for me. And I know FF people are going to shit on me for saying that, but it just didn't have that. I tried to do, I even had like millions of, okay, not millions, but a lot of RP videos. I did everything in the game possible. I thought that was going to be my new game.
In my opinion, that is Final Fantasy's biggest problem, but it's not something I want to get into just yet. Let's move on to the next topic in the video.
Let me think. Besides that, I think the combat isn't very good.
Yeah,
I think the combat is probably the
combat
weakest
is
point
very
of
hard
Final
to get
Fantasy
Yeah, there's an
14.
argument for
The
it.
combat is definitely not a problem. I know the biggest problem, I think that's what he's talking about, is how lame and boring the combat is at lower levels. And
Yeah, that's a
how-
problem too for sure.
No, it's the combat and the movement. You have to get used to it. Once you get used to it, it's fine. But the mechanics too, it goes off like late. I don't know how to explain it, man. The GCDT, you get used to it, it's fine. But getting used to that like delay, it was hard for me. I didn't mind it. It was just the end game again, going back to it. The delay was the problem for me. Everything was fine, man.
Sure.
No. Whenever I hit the interrupt button, I want it to happen immediately. I don't want there to be a 50 millisecond delay.
Also in PvP, like you could be behind the wall and that guy could like get a cast off and it goes like through the wall. It's like that stuff happens in classic WoW, but not in retail.
Or a 100 millisecond delay. That's bad. It doesn't matter if
Yeah,
you're
that's
level
what
90 or
exactly
level
what I was
10.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, fucking true. Yeah, whenever this shit happens, it feels like my fucking brain is lagging. And if you've never played 14 before, I'll show you
And one more thing, chat. Raiders download an add-on called, is it Alexander Ffxiv? Like they download this to like get rid of GC. That should be in the game too, man. That should be like inside the program.
exactly what he means. Here I'm going to press my kick, and I want you to pay attention to when I pressed it
Okay.
and when it went off. Let's watch it again in slow motion.
Okay.
And I'll tell you right now, between me pressing the button and the interrupted text coming up, there were in total 35 frames. In other words, more than half a second for the feedback. There's no argument that you can make that'll convince me that this is good.
The way that the abilities feel to press is not as satisfying as it is in, I think, Classic WoW or Lost Ark.
The
Straight
Lost
up,
Ark
because
buttons
they
are
don't
amazing.
instantly happen. There's this weird delay to them.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly
I
what I'm
can't be
saying.
the only
You could
person
get used
that
to it
sees
though.
this.
Yeah, you talk to a Final Fantasy XIV player, it's like fucking mass hysteria. Anyway, let's look at an example from WoW. So in Classic WoW, a lot of the damage that you're going to be taking are going to be from swings from mobs. What I would do is I would time my stun for right before the swing goes off. Like that. The game is responsive, there's instant feedback, and yeah, sure, maybe it's not instant, but it's responsive enough where I can trust it to go off when I press it. That's why I'm not afraid to press it at the last second. You just can't do that in Final Fantasy. And this shit goes beyond the effects not happening even though the buttons have been pressed. Your button will just not go off even though you're pressing it. Let me give you an example. In FF14, the longest your GCD can be is 2.5 seconds. Typically, people will play anywhere between 2 and 2.5 depending on what class they're playing. So for example, on
Great
Bard,
video. It's a
my
great
GCD
video.
would be
Very
2.47
in-depth.
seconds. which means that I have 2.47 seconds to use abilities that aren't on this cooldown, called off global cooldowns. I want you to pay attention to when I'm pressing these buttons and when they go off. Pay attention to the buttons on the left side. Look how early I'm pressing them versus how late they're going off. You can probably also notice that I'm spam clicking these buttons. Why? Because if I don't, sometimes they won't go off. Out of curiosity, I counted the gap between these actions happening, and it's about 35 to 37 frames. So not only are you waiting 2.5 seconds between each GCD, you're also waiting 0.6 seconds between each OGCD. This is what people mean when they say the game doesn't feel fluid. They're not talking about the GCD being long, they're not talking about the combat early game being shit, which, by the way, it is pretty shit, but I'll talk about that later. They're talking about this input lag when you're pressing your buttons. This shit just does not happen in WoW, and I don't even have to show you an example. Everybody knows it doesn't happen in WoW. When you press a button, it just goes off. And I'm not a shitter who's using this as a cope or an excuse as to why I can't clear raids. I've done every piece of raid worth doing in this game. What I am saying is that this feels like absolute shit to play, and no one can argue against it. There's no argument. If you want to know why this happens, it has to do with the way they made the game. I don't know, I'm just gonna blame it on the console players. Anyway. Every action in FF14 has a built-in 500 ms animation lock. So that means when you use a button, when you press a button, you're animation locked for half a second by default. Now keep in mind, this is the base animation lock. It could be higher, but it can never go below 0.5 seconds. But on top of that, the server also has to verify your action. And keep in mind, I'm not an expert, I'm not a fucking servers expert, so I might be using the wrong term, but basically what happens is, you press a button, the server has to receive this command, verify it, and then send it back to you. And this process depends on what your ping is. So say you're playing on the East Coast with, 80 ping. On top of the 500 ms animation lock, there's another 80 ms animation lock from when you send the information to the server, and another 80 from when the server sends it back to you. Keep in mind, again...
Like I said, when you're an MMO player, you get very, very passionate and just all in, man. So if your game turns bad or they don't fix stuff, you get upset. And he's cooking.
I'm probably using the wrong terminology. I'm probably just talking out of my ass. But the bottom line is, if you play on the East Coast with 80 ping, every single one of your GCD and OGCD has a built-in 0.66 second animation lock, give or take. Now, there's actually a way to get around that using an add-on called Ffxiv Alexander.
Exactly
and basically what it does is that it simulates your game.
I don't know why that's not in the game, though. Why is that not in the game? Why did they have to download an add-on for this?
Having 0 ping. But it doesn't remove the base 500 ms animation lock. Now, would I consider this cheating? Yeah, it's 100% cheating. It's impossible to have stable 0 ping. But I'm also going to say, I don't give a shit. I'm still going to use it. And I'm going to recommend everybody who raids to also use it. The clips that I showed you guys earlier were with Alexander on. And you can still see how awkward it felt. Right now I'm on West Coast, so I don't really need it. It doesn't really feel that bad not having it on. But when I used to be on East Coast, having this on and not having it on was night and day.
Same with WoW, but WoW is different, right? It's just you're changing your UI. It's not making your MS better or make your button response faster. That's different.
Not going to be hyperbolic and say that it was literally unplayable, but that's the way it felt. And it's not just the GCD.
It feels smoother.
Even the way other players' movements are updated on your screen is unresponsive. The example I'll be using is a mechanic from UCOP called Grand Octet. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but basically what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to clump up and run together in a group.
Damn,
now here from this person's POV, you'll see that it looks like he's running way ahead of the group, right? Well, what's actually happening is he's probably running at the same pace as everyone else. But their client-side position isn't updated on server-side in real time, so it always looks like everyone else is lagging. This happens to some extent on WoW, but from what I've seen, it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second's difference. Next, I'm going to show you a scenario from PvP. My Q here is a knockback. Watch what happens when I press it. Go fuck yourself, man. I pressed it when I was behind him, and he goes sideways. And on top of shit
this
like
is
this,
exactly what I'm in PvP. I played a lot of PvP. When Crystal came out, I wanted to make FF my main game, chat, so I played a shit ton. And the rating system, I think they changed it now, but it was too free back then. Like, people couldn't D-rank. Everyone just becomes Crystal. It's so easy.
To deal with the fact that everything in this game works off of snapshots.
Also, one more thing. Sorry, I don't want. I like FF. I think the story is amazing. But if I can make a criticism, they gotta put a little bit more into PP, like create longevity, because everyone just gets their gear and they never queue again, man. I think that's bad. Or I wish more people played maybe more rewards in the middle or long term. Just people queuing 1 or 2 weeks, getting their full set, never queuing again PvP. That sucks, man. It sucked.
Anyone who's ever played PvP knows what I'm talking about. You
I know
press
what you're talking
guard, you still get your butthole blasted. Stuff like that makes it impossible to have split-second decisions in PvP. Every time I queue up, I have to cosplay as Nostradamus and predict when things will happen. It's just not fun. And it's the reason why no one in this game will ever take PvP seriously. But this is a PvE game after all, so in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really
I wish
matter.
PvP did. I think Crystal has a fun concept. It's just the delays, and there was a lot of cheaters at the start. Whenever I press ult, I get poly insta, man. They're not even clicking me too.
Next, I want to address the problem of jobs at lower levels. Jobs below level 90 feel like shit to play. Most jobs aren't really fleshed out until level 80, with Reaper being a good example. You don't get your raid buff until level 72, and at level 70 you're pretty much just pressing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 over and over again. You don't get your Enshroud until level 80, which lets you go into your avatar form, which is what Reaper is all about. How anyone can play Reaper below level 80 is beyond me. And then you got Paladin, where you don't even get your dash until 74. And I'm not using 70 as an arbitrary number, I'm using 70 because that's the max level a free trial player can go up to. If you were a free trial Paladin player, you will never have a dash. Jobs are way too backloaded, and there's just not enough to chew on in the early levels. The main reason I hate doing roulettes in Final Fantasy is because I hate getting scaled down from level 90 to level 50, level 60, even level 70. Why would I willingly subject myself to an inferior gameplay experience? On retail, on the other hand, when I use dungeon finders, every dungeon is scaled to my level. I could be level 43, queuing into a dungeon with a level 13, and we would each have all of our buttons. We'd be in the same party, hitting the same mobs, with the only difference being that each mob is scaled individually to us. If you haven't been to max level, I can sort of see how you might not realize how bad it is. They 100% need to smooth out the leveling experience, and it's something that I wish they'll look into in Dawntrail. This is also why a lot of new players are turned off from the game. Not only is the GCT cooldown long, at low levels, you just have no buttons to press at all. And this is where I want to go back to where earlier I was talking about setting first impressions. It doesn't matter if the last 10 levels are fun, if players can't get through the first 80. I personally believe that this is a huge problem in FF14 because you can't skip the story. In patch 6.5, if a new player wanted to be caught up to current content, they would have to play through 200 hours of mandatory MSQ. More than half of that time will be spent in ARR and Heavensward. Basically, you're expecting players to sit through 100 hours of PS3 graphics with PS2 gameplay. Speaking from personal experience, I actually quit the game while doing Stormblood MSQ because I was so bored. And I didn't come back until I got a 2-week ban on League of Legends. On retail WoW at least, you can get to max level in like a day or two, and it's not that big a problem. To be clear, I'm not advocating for letting players skip the story entirely, as I think one of Final Fantasy's biggest strengths is that they're able to tell a continuous and more or less cohesive story. You will not find another MMO where players will care this much about story NPCs, and I think they should continue playing into that. With that said, if they manage to make the early game a lot more enjoyable visually and gameplay-wise, you'll be looking at a lot more players coming into the game and a lot higher player retention. As for if I think Final Fantasy XIV has a bad combat system, I think this largely depends on your perspective. The way I see combat in this game is instead of seeing a traditional MMO, I see a rhythm game. Encounter designs are largely static with little to no variance between each pull. In the same vein, your rotation each and every pull will be largely the same. This means that
If you do, or I've done DSR, and I think one of our tank mentioned, he said it's FF is like playing a piano. You just press the same thing, you just dance. Nothing changes. You do the same rotation.
at 99% of the time, you're going to be doing the same thing with no deviance. Progging a fight is like practicing a map in a game like Osu. You'll be pressing the same buttons each and every time. There will even be a certain cadence to your button presses. Sometimes I'll even use
This
the
guy's
in-game music to
insane. Yo,
help
this
me
is
with
more impressive than clearing ultimates.
the timing on some mechanics. This sort of combat can be satisfying in its own ways, but if you prefer more free-flowing games like Lost Ark, then Final Fantasy might not be the game for you. Even I'll admit that once you memorize everything, it gets pretty fucking stale. And therein lies another major issue. Content in this game just has no replayability. Take Savage fights, for example. The reason people would go back and re-clear Savage is for the gear. But that gear is only biz for one fight, which is the ultimate that comes to patch immediately after. Say you don't plan on doing the ultimate. Then what? What reason would you have to go back? In the case of the most recent raid tier, there isn't even an ultimate that comes after it. Because of that, I've made no effort to re-clear after the raid tier. and it's essentially dead content for me. Some of you might say, well, if you get the BIS, you can parse. But parsing's obviously not TOS friendly, is it? So I don't think they intend for the gear to be used for parsing. And since there isn't a leaderboard sanctioned by the developers, I don't really see a point. But some people enjoy just having the best gear. And in games like WoW, I get that. When you get your BIS in WoW, you feel powerful. But in Final Fantasy, when you get an upgrade, there's no tangible difference. I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference, but it's not something that you feel. Getting gear just isn't satisfying. Another issue I have is with gearing alts. In Final Fantasy, your BIS is usually a mix between raid gear.
I feel like FF tried to make the most fair. I saw like FF people complain about gearing, but dude, if you're a WoW player, you'll laugh at that. Because in WoW, it's not the best balance. There's a sweet spot for it. Gearing, I've mentioned this a lot. It's like opening Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon cards. There's like that satisfaction in WoW. If you see the loot you've been farming, it comes out, it's super hype, man. And you go there back to like get that. NFF, they made it so fair, which is correct thing to do, but at the same time, it doesn't hit that sweet spot. You just go there, you expect that same gear to drop, and you get it every time. And if you kill the last boss in Savage, you're going to get that epic mount, right? And everyone just gets it, and it doesn't have that special feel to it in an MMO. Whereas in WoW, if you're trying to get invincible and you finally get it, it feels incredible, right? It's like that opening a fresh pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon card, man. I think there's a sweet spot for that. And don't make it too long, but you know, not free is what I'm trying to say. Same thing, when I was watching Peo, while I was playing Classic WoW, FF raids do super well week 1, but after that, like nobody starts doing raids or they're reclearing. Whereas in Peo's like continue to go to try to get his Zulian Tiger or Thunder Fury, and there's a lot of people like invested trying to wash that loot. Like, holy shit, it's finally dropping, right? That feels good, man. In an MMO, that feels amazing, dude.
And gear that you purchase using a currency. This currency is released on the same patch as the rate tier, and every week you can farm a max of 450 of these tokens. In total, you'll need about 2,000. And assuming you're in a static re-clearing each week, it'll be about 5 or 6 weeks before you get your BIS. When you're getting your first set of gear, this is something that I can accept. It's whatever, 5 weeks for a guaranteed BIS, I'll take it. But when you're going for your second set, and you're playing a job not from the same archetype as your main job, you have to go through the whole process all over again. Say you're a samurai player, and you want to gear up ninja next. Well, they share neither armor nor accessory, so good luck. In 6.3, I pretty much got pigeonholed into playing Bard for top. All because I didn't want to drop 2 more months of sub money in 6.2 to gear up another job. I can almost accept things being this way for the patch that the raid is relevant. But the real dick in the bum is that even the patch after it, the weekly loot lockout and the 450 tome limit are still there. Trust me when I say this, Yoshi P. Nobody gives a shit about the raid tier the next patch. Letting people farm the gear the patch after is not going to lower the prestige of John fucking Autofellatio's week 60 clear. Trust me. For a game that boasts letting you do everything on one character, they really don't want you playing other jobs. Tell me, Yoshi P. What reason is there to keep the game this way, if not to milk more subs?
Holy Mala, you're the only one challenging Yoshi P like this. I've never heard an FF player talk like this to Yoshi P.
Ironically, if you
You're
made
gonna get
gear and
crucified,
alts
little
easier,
bro.
I would probably stick around longer to play more jobs. Another common complaint this expansion is about the Criterion dungeons. Forget re-clearing them. There is no incentive to do them at all in the first place. Many people thought that they were going to use this to give us horizontal progression by letting you gear for BIS and substitute.
No, I think a lot of raiders are going to be relieved that Mala's talking like this, because I've spoke with a lot of FF raiders too raiding, and they're frustrated how the community like just covers and shields, which is not a bad thing too, but some things need to be said. And I think in Dota, they said when the community cries the loudest, they start taking the feedback and writing it down, and it's important that you let them know what you guys want fixed and not. So it's good that you give them constructive criticism. Like Mala's giving constructive criticism. He's not just saying like, "Oh, WoW sucks, that's it." He's giving constructive criticism. It's good.
To savages, but all you end up getting are a few materias. I don't remember where I found this from, but the last time I checked, the engagement rate for the Criterion Savage dungeon was about 1%. Nobody is doing them because the content is too punishing for no reward. I don't care what anyone says, but nobody does a fight just for the sake of doing a fight. There's always an incentive. If you didn't get weapons from doing ultimates, a lot of people probably would not be doing ultimates, myself included. I think what sucks the most is that this is the content that we got to replace a Bozja and Eureka type zone. Sure, they weren't perfect, but at least they had replayability. And what came with them are what I feel are two of the most unique encounters in the game. The Lubum Regine Savage and Baldesian Arsenal. It's a real shame because if Criterion Dungeons had a better reward system, it would have been a huge success. But instead, this is something that even PFers will not touch. And this is the major reason why people say Endwalker is boring, because there's nothing to grind for. Anyway, I think I've complained enough in this video. I've got a few more complaints about in-game rating, but the video's getting too long. If anything, I'll just make a second video. The bottom line is, while the game isn't dying, there's still a lot of things that I would like to see changed. Whether those changes will happen, that's a whole different story. At the end of the day, this is still a game that I love, and I still want to see it do as well as possible. But in the
it's because he played this game a lot. He's passionate. He knows what to talk about.
meantime, I'm probably just going to go play Classic WoW or OSRS, as there just is not enough content for me to do in this game. At least it's not Valorant, right?
The downfall fight.
Hello, everyone.
The snappiness
Anyway,
and the
chat. I'm gonna
explosive.
share the video. Here you guys go. That was a good video. Hopefully you don't get crucified by the Ffxiv community. I don't think you said anything wrong. I think it was valid points. I will say I don't know if anyone's gonna get this far, but I think the story was amazing. Story was amazing. I got emotional. I got very invested. It was the first MMO I got very emotional of story-wise. It's just the end game was the problem for me, at least. Like graphic, GCD, the rotation, you get used to it playing the game for a long time. It's just the end game is what lacked for me. I think PvE-wise and glam-wise, I think those were like, they nailed it, right? It was just the end game for me. Way better than the guy who wasn't Cone AoE's back. I cried when Graha Tira ate a taco. Yeah, Graha Tira, man. Got emotional about him. Anyways, here's the video again.